of, I wouldn't call it a background, but how I'm familiar with you, Lawrence, is I think it had to have been 2007, 2008. I think you are fairly largely responsible for, at least in my age group, a resurgence really in science and in um, curiosity towards the sciences in a way that I had not seen in my whole life up
Oh,
until that point. There was you and a few others, and much of it can be attributed to Joe Rogan bringing people these people such as
yeah.
yourself. But I believe I first learned how old the universe is from yourself. So that's a number that's always stuck with me. And I just wanted to let you know that there has been, if it was had affected me or brought me onto this sort of stuff up here in Canada. I live near Toronto.
Uh-huh.
There's probably a couple million people out there who started listening to you back then, along with some other people, about these things and got a curiosity out of that. So I thank you for that. And I wanted to know if you're aware, if people come up to you and talk to you about that, because that's how many years now? I'm looking 2025, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, thanks. That always makes me feel good. People do, it's surprising to me how actually around the world people come up to me. Sometimes it makes me feel pretty old when they say, I heard you when I was a little kid and, and you made me interested in science. But really, I mean, that I can't think of anything better than that. The reason I did what I do and much of what I do is to try and encourage people to wonder about the universe and think about the universe and appreciate how exciting it is. And I'm returning the favor. When I was a kid, I used to. There was obviously no podcasts or anything like that, but I read books by Isaac Asimov and George Gamow, and also physicists Richard Feynman, Albert Einstein, and that's what got me interested in science. And so I'm kind of returning the favor, and it is very humbling and very. People are sometimes afraid to come up to me and say that, and I'm always so happy when they take the time to do that. And it is weird in random places, and I mean strange places around the world, from Kazakhstan to the north of Sweden. People, it's really nice, and yeah. So I feel fortunate to have had that opportunity to have that impact. And yeah, you just made my day. So the rest of the interview will be fine. I don't care what
That's
happens.
great. Well, I remember back in those days, you'd be sitting, well, you as in me and others that I spoke to, we would sit there and we would listen to something or we would watch something, a speech or a podcast or a documentary, and we'd have other things open as we'd never heard this stuff before. So we'd hear something and we'd be typing it up on the side to say, make sure I look at that video later and everything else. Have you noticed, or what have you noticed has changed in either an increased curiosity or a lack of curiosity, for better or for worse? What has changed in terms of your field and how it's been attended to or paid attention to by the general public?
Well, I think what's happened, as you get older, I think you get more negative about these things. You say, "Oh, it used to be so good," but so I don't want to fall into that trap. Except, I do think people are less willing to do what you just did. I think
Hmm.
people are less willing to read or follow up. It amazes me how many comments I get on something I write that's based on just the title, and it's clear that most people never get past the title, and unfortunately, in a lot of things I write, if it's for a newspaper or something else, the title is determined by the editor, and usually they choose some ridiculous title that has nothing to do with the article, and so I'm always amazed at how people uh, respond. I mean, with the new book, The War on Science, I was surprised. Some people right away and said, "Your your Trump derangement syndrome is already showing," and in fact, it's exactly not that
Hmm.
here, because it's talking about the culture war science, the woke aspect of attack on science. So I kind of feel sad that people, the attention span of people seems to decrease to the length of a tweet or something like that, and that's unfortunate, because you have to go a little deeper than that, especially if you're going to get something wonderful to learn about the universe. So um, I don't know what the solution is. Obviously we try with online, and I do podcasts and I do lectures and other things, and I try and get people interested. And of course, there's some segment that really is and craves that stuff. And that's the other thing, what also is kind of time invariant is that so many sort of high level producers on TV in particular and movies, and I'm involved in a lot of in those areas, think that somehow anything scientific is going to turn people off, when it's exactly the opposite. People are fascinated to learn about the wonders of the universe, but somehow people think that will turn people off, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a pretty old way of looking at things, I would say, in terms of media, to just assume that there isn't an audience out there for any given topic, when I think it's been clear that there's even an audience for people loudly eating into their microphone, for example. So if you can get millions of people to watch that, I think
Yeah.
you might as well take the leap.
Well, let me add one thing, and I think people are also craving hearing things from the horse's mouth, in a sense. I mean, there's journalists, there's science journalists, they write about things, but I think people really like to hear, when it comes to science, from scientists about what's happening, and so that's particularly useful for those of us who are fortunate enough to either have a popular voice or who somehow can speak publicly, and so there is a great appetite for that, and I think we could use more of it.
For sure. There's always a sense where if you don't go to the direct source, at this point, I don't even trust the ability to type out the quote properly, because I've seen it enough times where somebody sort of, you watch a video. I don't know if you ever do this, but you watch a video and you need to transcribe it. And you basically generally know what they said, but if you type that can really change a person's interpretation. So you have to get it exactly correct.
Yeah, famous examples of commas in the wrong place, leave shoots, and anyway, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, so where you're talking about the culture war and in the new book and the stuff that's been put out already, it's about how one of the points I remember was that DEI, or diversity programs, hiring not based on merit, has it choked the ability to make advancements or to hire the right people, in your opinion? What's sort of the thesis behind what you're talking about here, and what the main effect these things have had on research or development?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects here. There are 39 authors, and there's all sorts of different aspects. DEI is one aspect. Another is sort of the scientific nonsense being introduced in the scientific curriculum, and as well as in public and cancel culture. But I think there's no doubt it's having an effect. And take DEI, for instance. They're young. Many of us, and this isn't just me, but I've talked to many colleagues, including, by the way, female colleagues whose male students, white male students or Asian male students in particular, realize that it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get a job because of that. And that's really that's a shame. If the opposite was happening, if you couldn't get look, 60 years ago, if you were a woman, it was very difficult to get a job in science, but that's 60 years ago. If nowadays you've overtly said, I'm sorry, we're just not going to give women jobs in science, there'd be an outcry. But the fact that young males are in Canada, they're being overtly discriminated against. It's legal to have ads. I mean, take the ad I got an ad here, one of the ones that mentioned the book, University of Waterloo computer science advertisement. Position available in all areas of artificial intelligence. The call is open to qualified individuals who self-identify as women, transgender, gender fluid, non-binary, or two-spirit. And there's a host of those things where people see in Canada, you're legally allowed to restrict white advertisements of jobs so that white males or Asian males are not, the job isn't open to them. And in fact, a ridiculous residual from unfortunately for the Trudeau government, was that the most prominent job positions in Canada, these Canada research chairs, which were originally created to try and woo expatriate Canadians, in some sense like myself, back to Canada. But in any case, they're very prestigious positions. But they decided that the positions have to match exactly the background demographics of the country. So 52.1% have to be women. It goes on and on. And that means that a lot of places like the University of Toronto and other places and Guelph, but many universities have openly said they will not hire males for kind of research chairs because they have to reach this demographic goal, and there's no reason for that. It's discrimination, clearly discrimination, and it's awful for science because good people get cut out, and it also is awful for the people, in my opinion, who get the jobs because they always have an asterisk. It's like in baseball, when there's certain records, there's an asterisk. If you get a job and if you're a woman and you get a job for positions only open to women, for the rest of your career, there's going to be an asterisk. People are going to say, was she any good, or did she get the job because it was only open to women? So it hurts everybody, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and we do see a lot of that in this country. I remember specifically writing about a story in regards to hiring blocks they'll do, and they call this a hiring block where we're going to specifically hire 20 people of one specific race, and the idea that that isn't, prejudice is really confusing to me. Now, I spoke to a reporter who specializes, we'll call it, he's been most popularized through his work, contacting large corporations and questioning them on their policies in relation to race-based hiring or gender-based hiring practices. And he said that some of them, some believe in it, some are against it, some are unaware it's going on in their own company, which is confusing to me. But I wanted to ask you, have you spoken to people who are in charge of giving out these grants, or high up university professors who are in charge of some of these things, and asked them why they're doing this, and have what kind of results have you had, if you have?
Well, look, I mean, I was at universities for 40 years, and I was involved in a lot of this. But I mean, many people at universities aren't in control. That's also the sad thing. Universities have become populated by bureaucracies, DEI bureaucracies, and they pull the strings in hiring. It should be the faculty, for example, that hire new faculty. But take University of California, Berkeley, for example. For a long time now, we're getting away from that in some sense due to recent executive orders from the current administration. But for many years, in order to apply for a faculty job, or sometimes even a postdoctoral position, you had to basically make a DEI statement, which is more than just a loyalty oath. It wasn't a simple statement like, I'm not going to discriminate, or I'll hire anyone independent of race, creed, color, gender. That wasn't good enough. That wouldn't pass muster. At UC Berkeley, for a biology professor job, I believe in 2019, I think something like 76% of the candidates were rejected, and these are by DEI monitors, were rejected on the basis of their DEI statement before anyone could look at the research statement. I mean, can you imagine that? And so I think a lot of faculty are, just simply don't have control, or feel that they have to go along with it, because there are many examples, and some of them in the book described, where faculty say, hold on, are we doing the right thing? That alone is often enough to get censored or censured, and in some cases fired, on the basis of claiming that, well, maybe we should be looking at merit, or maybe we should think about this twice. And that kind of freezing of free speech, where faculty are actually afraid to speak, is even more terrifying. When I wrote about the ideological corruption of science, I think in a Wall Street Journal article in maybe 2021 or 22, I got a lot of letters back from faculty who agreed with me. These are faculty I didn't know. Emails. And what was striking and terrifying was what a large fraction, and that meant almost all of them, wrote, first of all, from personal email accounts, and in a number of cases under assumed names, because they were so afraid that someone at their university or administrator might see that they agreed with me. Well, that's like the Stasi in whatever, in East Germany or in Russia. I mean, that kind of fear should be the opposite thing. I mean, if there's one place where you should be free to question, it should be academia, because it's the only way knowledge will progress, particularly scientific knowledge. And if you say, as one of the people, Carol Hooven, who wrote it in the book, if you say, biology says that sex is binary, there are two sexes, and she eventually the situation became so bad for her after saying that on TV that she had to resign from her position at Harvard. I mean, even if you disagree with her, although if you know anything about biology, you shouldn't, but even if you disagree with her, you have a disagreement. That's fine. That's what science is all about. Let's have a discussion. But when people are too afraid to speak up or speak out for fear of their jobs, that's really bad. I mean, and it really means you can't progress. You can't. because science is a dialectic. It involves a healthy debate between ideas, so the good ideas survive. And that's one of the reasons why I produced the book. I mean, there's 39 people who are from all different disciplines and many different political persuasions, so it isn't all right wing or left wing. But if we're willing to speak out, and there are some prominent names here, then I hope it'll encourage other faculty to speak out as well.
Yeah, maybe by the sounds of it, it's not moving as quickly as some people believe it to be. I think a lot of people have this idea that this sort of thinking, or at least these hiring practices, are becoming far more culturally unpopular than they actually might be. People might be in their bubbles about that. And I wanted to ask you, when did you think this started happening? Did you see it as a slow progression of like, no, you need to make this statement and now we need to have these quotas? Or was there something that sparked it in your eyes?
Well, I mean, it was already developing by 2015 and even earlier, and some prescient people noticed it. I began to notice it. Well, you know, there were certain things you had to do, and I didn't mind them. I was chair of a physics department in the 1990s. And every time we didn't hire a woman, if we didn't for any position, we had to write a long letter explaining why we didn't hire that person. You know, okay, you know, you still have to show that they were the best person, but and that's fine. And in fact, when I was there, we hired the first two women in the physics department. But you know, I think that the need for that is gone. But I think the need for the extreme wokeness, the extreme political correctness and social justice aspect, that really began to hit more probably after George Floyd. I mean, that's when it really hit a crescendo. That's when departments and scientific institutions went crazy, claiming that academia was systemically racist and all scientific disciplines were systemically racist or sexist. And so it really reached a nutty crescendo by 2020, 2021. And it went out, and it may have peaked, but it's still the problem is bureaucracies are entrenched. And so once you create them, it's very hard to get rid of them. My friend of mine, Sheldon Glashow, is a colleague of mine, won Nobel Prize in Physics, said, you know, they still have donkeys from the Civil War. Once you have a bureaucracy, it's hard to get rid of it. But also, once you require people to buy in order to get a job, you tend to get people who have bought in. Now, some people will just do it. You know, they'll look up ChatGPT or something and get a good statement, whatever that may be, and they don't believe it. They just want to get on with their work. But if you're self-selecting for people who think that social justice is what they're hired to do instead of scholarship, then you have big problems. And then the other big problem, which happened early on, and I think the internet and mobs really began to affect things. And that again was probably started around 2015, 2016, are the heads of institutions have no backbone. Mm-hmm. They would rather get rid of faculty or do anything than have a social justice campaign against them in any way. And you can see universities switching on a dime to see what's in their best interest. And they'll get rid of free speech or due process or whatever else. And then you have institutional leaders virtue signaling. When Francis Collins, who was the head of the National Institutes of Health, and I know Francis, after George Floyd, stating that the biomedical sciences were systemically racist, you know, and he was head of the largest biomedical sciences research institute in the world, and if they really were systemically racist, he should have resigned if he really believed what he said. And so this kind of virtue signaling, just to get on the bandwagon, to get ahead of the crowds, or to be willing to shut something down for fear that some individual student or a bunch of students will start a social media campaign, a letter campaign. It's awful. You know, university presidents used to have some intellectual integrity, and now most of them are salespeople trying to raise money, but from donors, and they'll look to see which side the wind is blowing on and move in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's something people have noticed as well. You know, when Trump comes into office and all of a sudden every company no longer believes in Pride Month, or most companies, you know, are just, you know, we used to fly this for 3 months just to be sure, but now it's going to be a day to 5 days and that's it. And it showed people that transition when Trump just got into office, I think showed people that they really can't trust large corporations, nor should they have In the past, I would never have advised somebody to look to the UFC or Coca-Cola for their political markers, or Bud Light or something like that. But when the companies are backing people and then all of a sudden they don't care about them at all, it really shows that the blowing with the wind is more prevalent than people
when
ever
they
knew.
switch on a dime like that, and I've seen it happen in universities like crazy. I think you should always look. You should be skeptical of everything. That's why I'm a scientist, and ask, what is there a vested interest in why people are doing what they're doing? What do they have to gain from what they're doing? It's what I always ask when I see this, and I'm always suspicious. Now that doesn't mean that all the time that they're not saying what they believe in, but the main thing is that especially academia, it's academia is meant to develop scholarship and knowledge and disseminate it. It's not to solve the moral problems of the world. The idea is that if you educate people and you get them to think critically and have knowledge of what's going on and what their history and culture and what the universe is like, then maybe they'll make better decisions if they get into positions of power. It'll be based on reason and empirical evidence. But it isn't the job of universities to say what is right and wrong, or what injustices should be righted. I mean, it's fine if individual scholars talk about that, but there should again be an open debate on that.
One of the notes I noticed for the book was the idea that there was anti-government legislation, or a push for funding, or sorry, government pushes or government funding towards things that were specifically anti-science. And I wondered what that was referring to.
Oh, well, let me, again, you're in Canada, right? So I'm going to
Yes,
give
sir.
an example of Canada. Canadian
Wonderful.
government fund there was a program called, I think, Frontiers in Science, New Frontiers in Research Fund. It's a project of the Canadian government. They sponsored an academic initiative at Concordia entitled Decolonizing Light. Decolonizing, how it was designed to show how colonial scientific knowledge was and still is reproduced in the context of light. And that physics is hard and objective science is disconnected from social life and geopolitical history. So we should do something about it. Well, it turns out understanding how light works should be disconnected from social and political history. Stars shine the way they do, independent of what we're doing, and well before humans ever arose. And the notion that the theory of electromagnetism, which is one of the most beautiful scientific theories in the world, should somehow be decolonized because it happened to be developed by a few people in England, is just and France, is ridiculous. And that's the kind of thing that's being funded. There are a lot more examples of this kind of funding of pseudoscience. There's efforts to decolonize mathematics. And in California, there was an initiative to develop a new math curriculum. And one of the parts of it was that somehow getting the right answer was an example of white supremacy.
Yes, I believe at that point it was something like sometimes 2 + 2 does not equal 4. I believe was one of the.
I mean, it's and that's true in a different base, but that's a different thing. But in base 3 it isn't equal to 4. But anyway, it's utter nonsense. And there's a great quote. I don't know if I can find it here. Look, a lot of this began in the context of social sciences. And we used to laugh when I taught at Yale. We used to frankly laugh at the people down the hill. We taught at Science Hill, the deconstructionists and postmodernists who were saying nonsense. And we said it would never happen in science. I hope I can find it, because there's a statement. This is an example of the kind of stuff that's now gone into science, but it used to just be in social sciences. Where some social scientist basically said, I'll paraphrase, that when it comes to the natural world, the natural world has absolutely nothing to do with the scientific models of the universe, or something like that. That nature itself has no relationship to the derivation of knowledge, and it was just crazy. Anyway, I know I put it down here because I thought it was so nuts, but I can't seem to find it now.
All right, I want to ask you something more serious, and then I'll end on a ridiculous note afterwards.
Okay.
Some of what I've been writing about recently has to do with AI, and Elon Musk has his robot restaurant going, and I've even written about, I believe it was a machine that used brain cells as its form of AI. I forget what country that was. I'm gonna assume it was Germany, just for the fun of it, but it was definitely Europe. Do you see any issues coming up in the near or not so distant future about implications from bioscience and biotech being, do you think there's any lines that are going to be crossed? Do you think there's any lines that are in danger of being crossed with AI? I think it is I know it is well underway in the United States with the building of these giant campuses to house the data for AI centers. Small nuclear reactors are being built to fuel these data centers, so they're going all in on it, just as the Trump administration wanted. What dangers do you see coming up from them? Because on one hand, I see the Brave browser or the Grok AI. Sometimes that's just a search engine that's talking to you like it's a person. But on other hands, you see these crazy videos that look lifelike, and I'm like, where is the technology really? So what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think, as often, there's a lot of hype, and one has to cut through the hype. I think, and of course, look, every new development has risks and benefits, and we have to think carefully about what those are. I'm not as concerned as some people are, but AI, partly because I think that AI is neither artificial nor intelligent at this point, and I think we're a long way from artificial general intelligence. You're right. Most of the chat browsers are, they regurgitate beautifully. They regurgitate stuff that they've read off the web. Mm-hmm. But and you have to be very careful. That's why maybe because of my age, I find I very rarely use them. I'd rather do the research myself. Mm-hmm. But there will be developments that are going to change the way we live. AI is one example of something that probably in many ways will change the kind of jobs, what people do, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. It's just going to be different, and we need to anticipate that. What I do worry about more than anything is not the potential of AI destroying the world so much, certainly in the near term, as much as certain companies, if wealth becomes concentrated in such a way that the companies that have the best AI can go light years ahead of other companies, then you're going to see, you're going to displace a lot of people's jobs, and that wealth is going to go into one place. I would love if we had a situation where AI was able to do many people's jobs, but the rest of us were able to go and sit in the coffee shop and read books or listen to music and have nice discussions. That would be fine. It would actually maybe be a better world if many of the jobs that currently people have they free up their time, more productivity, more wealth, and if it was somehow spread so people benefited from that development, it'd be fine. But I suspect what's going to happen is, and we already see it happening, is that mega wealthy individuals and companies will develop, because they have the resources, potential AIs that allow them to access a huge amount of resources and wealth, and if we don't recognize that many people are going to be displaced, then it's going to cause huge dislocations of society that could be a problem. I think we have to think about these things, but when I think I wrote a book before this last book called The Edge of Knowledge, and I talked about consciousness and AI. And when people talk about how AI is going to destroy everything, I like to go back, because I like to do history, to what was originally the 9th century BC, and then it went to the 6th century, when writing was first developed in ancient Greece. Okay, well, you had people like Plato saying that writing was going to destroy the world, because people would forget how to tell stories, and you couldn't communicate as well with someone by reading their stuff as opposed to face. Well, writing did change the world, but as an author, I don't think it made the world a worse place. It just changed it. It made it different. And I suspect AI, just like smartphone. Look, when I was young, no one was wandering around staring at these things wherever they go. And that's bad, but also good. The bad part is that we're disconnected from each other. The good part is that I can access so much of what I need on this. But as an educator, there's more information but there's also more information in this device than I could ever imagine. And so we have to teach children. Teaching should be done differently. You know, it used to be we teach them facts in schools, but facts aren't as important as the ability to think critically and be able to tell the wheat from the chaff. We have to teach people how to search critically and question what they see and look broadly at different sources, because that's important, because there's a lot of stuff here that's good and a lot of stuff here that's bad. And if you can't tell the difference, then you're in trouble.
Yes, I think that the advent of each new technology as it comes out, and I'll just date it back as far as I can with the internet to the smartphones to AI, that there seems to be a rush at the beginning, and then you sort of have to be able to control yourself in terms of that. If you're spending all the time, and I've known people like this, you'll sit in a room with them and they're listening, but they don't hear you at all, because they're doing, I believe is what is referred to as doom scrolling. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but just incessantly scrolling on their phone to the point where you can't have a conversation with them. It can turn the brain to putty in that sense. And I think with AI, if it becomes just something you're completely attached to, in the sense where you need it for an answer to everything, as if you're constantly looking towards, I don't even know, I can't even compare it to anything, but for an answer, let me just not figure it out myself. I think that's when it becomes a problem, and I think there's a lot of personal responsibility at play with things like that. And if you haven't seen early, I believe, 1900s anti-electricity ads, then I encourage you to go look those up. Those are hilarious. Just there's a dog stuck in power lines.
Yeah, the future is terrifying, but it's also exciting. And I like to spend more time getting people excited than terrified. Mm-hmm. And I wish I didn't have to write books like this about problems. I wish I could spend more time doing what encouraged you when you were younger, which is getting people turned on. And I think, you can't. Some people think science is bad. That's part of the problem. And I said this in a piece I just wrote. Look, a lot of the problems here, which are real, have caused the current U.S. administration to do stuff which is in many ways worse. The assumption that all scientists are woke or somehow leftist, or that all university investors are bad, means they want to close down science and they stop funding this. Where in fact, sure, there's a lot of crap going on. There's a lot of nonsense, and we got to fight that. But there are a lot of good work being done. And if you just throw the baby out with the bathwater, then it really hurts the country. You got to keep supporting the best scientists, because they kept their heads down and were doing their science. Now, maybe some can say, well, that we can blame them then for not speaking up early on, but that Schadenfreude doesn't really help anything. It's really, but the current administration, to fight one kind of injustice with another, to say we're gonna get rid of everybody, we're gonna get rid of science grants for everybody because we don't trust any scientists. Well, that's shooting yourself in the foot.
That's a fair statement to make, and you mentioned people being against science, and I want to ask you with this ridiculous question: if you've ever been, seriously accosted by, and I don't mean physically, I would hope not, but somebody of the space is fake doctrine, or at the very least flat Earth, but I think we can go beyond that. The space is fake is more interesting.
I've had to speak about flat. I mean, I've had journalists call me about flat Earth meetings where there's a meeting in France with 300 PhDs who believe the Earth is flat, and I love to come up with new reasons all the time why it isn't. I mean, as a cosmologist, I get, of course, email every day telling me that everything we think we know about the universe is wrong, and they have a theory of everything. And of course, there's a lot of people who earnestly believe we're in a matrix, and somehow that we're in a simulation. And there's not only is there no evidence of it, but there's a lot of anti-evidence, I would say, because first of all, in a simulation, usually there's some pixels that don't work, and in this case, with some places where the laws of physics break down, we don't see that. But what they also don't seem to get is okay, a more advanced civilization creates a simulation that's us. Okay, but what about the more advanced simulation, civilization, where they created as a simulation in a yet more advanced civilization? Yeah. And is it elephants all the way up? I mean, how did if those advanced civilizations could evolve by evolution over billions of years as we did here on Earth, then why assume we're a simulation? It doesn't answer anything. It doesn't answer any questions about the world, nor does it seem to me to make sense. So Maybe it's true, but it doesn't seem to me to be a very productive line of thinking. I mean, it's good for movies. It's nice for the Matrix, but
I think you need
science
to.
fiction.
Yeah, I think you need to do a video where you watch the Alien series and
Uh-huh.
dissect it. The Prometheus theory of older humans. I guess they were just extinct in that movie, but I'm thinking more of along the lines of they terraform Earth after
Well,
being. I don't remember.
take 2001. I mean,
Hmm.
famous Space Odyssey. Where the poor apes were doing poorly until but that's not to say that in a general sense this idea of Panspermia is certainly true. And one of the exciting things that I write about in many places is that organic materials, in fact, the basis of amino acids, are being discovered on comets and in interstellar media. And so it does suggest to us that life evolved on Earth about as soon as it could have, within a few 100 million years of the formation of the Earth. And probably the laws of physics wouldn't have even allowed it earlier because there was bombardment of asteroids that would have evaporated oceans. But it's possible that the basic building blocks of life were created elsewhere early on in stellar environments and came to Earth. So in that sense, we already are stardust. If you've ever heard me talk, you know that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded pretty well, and the atoms in your left hand might have come from a different star than your right. One of the most poetic things I know about the world. You really are stardust.
You're going to anger so many people with that. I think I want to call this podcast Lawrence Krauss Says Space is Fake and see how many comments of, oh my God, that piece of garbage.
Yeah.
So, with your
Well, don't
permission,
do
we'll
that
do
to me
that.
because I'll get all the
Okay. All
emails
right. Fine.
as a result.
All right. Well, I appreciate you speaking to me again. I thank you for being one of the people to put me on to some level of advanced thinking or just curiosity into physics and space. Long time ago. I'm only 18, so really I was 5 when that happened. But I appreciate it, and I hope everything. I hope the comments are kind when the book is as the book is making its rounds online and in stores. Okay.
Well, sure. Although I don't mind comments that are unkind. I just get people to think. As long as it gets people to think, that's all that matters.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day. Okay.
Okay, you too. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks.